On the vast prairies of the American frontier, where the wind swept over golden fields and the sky stretched endlessly, lived a man named Samuel Hargrave, known by everyone simply as Sam, the richest rancher 4 miles around, a man whose fortune had been built on cattle, land, and an iron will that few dared to test. He was respected by many, feared by some. Beyond the strong walls and the chandeliers imported from Europe, he carried a heart heavy with suspicion. For Sam, despite his wealth, trusted very few, believing that people were drawn to him not out of love or kindness but out of greed for what he possessed, and that belief had hardened him through the years, especially after the betrayal of a woman he once loved who had married him only for his land and left him, cold and bitter when the truth came out. So when whispers reached him of a struggling young widow in town who had captured the sympathy of neighbors for her gentle spirit and quiet dignity, his curiosity grew, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he found himself inviting her to work in his home as our housekeeper, though many in town wondered why a man so wealthy would bring in a woman with no references, no family name to protect her, and nothing but the clothes she wore and the courage she carried in her eyes. Her name was Clara Moore, and she had been left destitute after her husband, a farmhand, died suddenly in an accident, leaving her with nothing but unpaid debts, a tiny cabin soon taken by the bank, and a reputation for being hardworking yet unlucky. And while others offered her pity, Sam offered her employment, though in truth, he was testing something far more than her ability to polish silver or sweep the halls. He wanted to see if she, like so many before her, would bend and twist herself to the allure of money and privilege, or if she was different, untouched by greed. From the first day Clara stepped into the Hargrave mansion, she carried herself with a quiet strength that surprised Sam. Her hands moved with practiced diligence as she dusted shelves lined with books she couldn't read and polished banisters that glowed beneath her care, but her eyes never lingered on the expensive trinkets or the gold-framed paintings on the walls. She seemed to walk through wealth as if it were nothing but smoke, focusing instead on her tasks, and in the evenings, when her work was done, she would sometimes hum a lullaby she used to sing to her late husband, soft and low, unaware that Sam listened from the shadows of the hall, studying her as though she were a puzzle sent to test his heart. Yet Sam's mistrust was not easily erased, and so he devised a plan, one he thought clever, though it carried a cruelty he did not fully acknowledge. He would pretend to sleep in his great chamber, leaving his treasures nearby, jewels and coins scattered on a desk, keys to the safe left carelessly on the knitstand, the very temptations that had undone others before. And he would see, in the silence of night, what Clara would do when she thought no one watched. The night came when he finally put his plan in motion. The fire crackled low in the hearth, throwing shadows across the walls, and Sam lay upon the grand bed with its carved posts, while Clara, unaware of his design, entered quietly with her lamp to tidy the chamber as she always did, moving gracefully, her steps soft upon the rug, placing his boots by the hearth, and straightening the heavy curtains. But then her eyes fell upon the desk where gold coins glimmered in the lamplight, and where, beside them, lay a letter sealed with wax, a letter Sam had placed there deliberately, though what was written within was only a meaningless contract, meant to appear important, waited for the telltale sound of coins clinking or paper rustling, and inside his chest. But Clara did not touch the coins, and Sam, though he kept his eyes shut, could sense her presence like a warmth lingering over him. And then something wholly unexpected happened. She bent slightly, not toward the money, but toward him, studying his face as if searching for something beyond the mask of wealth and power. And after a long moment, she whispered words so quiet, Sam almost doubted he had heard them. "I pray you find rest." She reached for the quilt at the edge of the bed and gently pulled it higher over him, tucking it against his shoulder the way a mother might cover a child, her movements tender, unpracticed in deception, but rich in care. And Sam, though determined to remain still, she turned next to the coins, and though her gaze lingered briefly, it was not with greed, but with something closer to sorrow, as if the sight of so much wealth in one place only reminded her of the struggles of others, herself included, and with a quiet sigh, she moved past them, lifting the letter only to set it neatly in the corner, aligning it as if disorder itself offended her. Before extinguishing the lamp and stepping softly out of the chamber, alone in the dark, Sam opened his eyes, frozen by what he had witnessed, for all his expectations had been shattered. He had prepared himself for disappointment, for proof of selfishness, yet instead he had found gentleness, a touch so kind it disarmed his bitterness, and for the first time in many years, he lay awake not with anger or suspicion, but with confusion, wonder, and something dangerously close to hope. Still, he told himself it could have been chance, a single night of virtue, and so his plan stretched into days, with more tests, more feigned slumbers, more temptations left in her path. But each time Clara surprised him, when he left the safe ajar, she closed it carefully and muttered that doors left open invite trouble. When he scattered silver on the floor, she gathered it into a dish without hesitation, treating it as if it were nothing more than fallen buttons. When he groaned softly in his supposed sleep, she brought a damp cloth to his forehead as though his comfort mattered more than the riches at her fingertips, and every time Sam's certainty crumbled a little more, replaced by a respect he did not wish to admit. The town, meanwhile, gossiped about the strange arrangement, whispering that perhaps Clara was clever, biding her time until the rancher made her his bride, or that Sam was testing yet another woman as he always did, doomed to find fault and cast her aside. But inside the mansion's walls, something deeper stirred, something neither of them yet understood, a slow unraveling of walls built by grief and guarded by pride. And so, we leave Sam staring into the dark, shaken by the truth that his wealth cannot buy what Clara offers freely, care without expectation, kindness without demand, and a reminder that even the hardest hearts can tremble when touched by genuine compassion. Dear listener, if you have been swept into this tale, if you feel the stirrings of curiosity about what Sam will do next, whether he will surrender to hope or cling to his doubt, then I invite you to stay with us for Chapter 2. And before you go, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, for your support keeps these stories alive and ensures that many more tales from the wild and tender West will find their way to you. The days after Sam Hargrave's secret tests became a whirlwind of emotions he struggled to master, for each night that Clara more revealed her quiet honesty, her unshakable dignity, and her selfless care, a new fracture opened in the armor he had forged around his heart, gathering proof of human nature. In truth, he was the one being tested, for every moment she tucked the quilt at his shoulder or sang a low hymn while dusting his shelves, he found himself thawing from the bitterness that had defined him for so long. Yet fear gripped him all the same, fear that this too might end in betrayal, that if he let down his guard even for a moment, waking before dawn to fetch water, scrubbing the floors until they shone, and tending to the small garden at the mansion's edge where she coaxed herbs and flowers from the stubborn soil, and though she was paid fairly, though Sam ensured she had food and clothing, she never acted as though she were entitled to more. Instead, she treated every gift with humility, as if she still could not believe her fortune at having a roof over her head and honest work to do. What Clara did not know was that Sam had begun to watch her not only during his staged slumbers, but also in the daylight, or how she offered bread to a beggar child who wandered up the road, and each act of compassion drove the nail deeper into Sam's heart until he realized he no longer wished merely to test her but to understand her, to know what kind of strength allowed her to endure poverty, loss, and loneliness without turning bitter, and what kind of grace allowed her to serve without envy in a house dripping with wealth she would never claim. One evening, unable to restrain himself, Sam broke the silence he had so carefully maintained. After Clara laid out his supper of roast venison and potatoes, he spoke not as the master of the house, but as a man uncertain of his footing, and Clara, surprised by the question, paused with the tray in her hands and answered simply, "Because grief only wins if it steals the kindness from us, and I will not let mine win." Her words struck Sam with a force greater than any storm on the prairie, for they revealed a truth he had long forgotten, that wealth could guard a man's body but never heal his soul, and that healing required the very thing he had shut out, kindness. Replaying her words until they burned into his memory, and though the urge to confess his secret tests clawed at him, he feared what would happen if she knew how he had deceived her, watched her in secret, and laid traps at her feet. Yet fate has a way of bringing hidden truths to light, and it was not long before the moment arrived when Sam's carefully guarded secret could no longer remain. In the shadows, one stormy evening, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rolling like drums of war, Clara entered his chamber to draw the curtains and stoke the fire, only to find Sam not asleep but sitting upright in the chair by the hearth. And before she could ask what troubled him, he spoke, his voice raw with confession. "Clara, I have wronged you, for I have tested you as though you were some thief waiting to betray me, pretending to sleep so I might catch you in dishonor, leaving riches where you might stumble, watching your every move as though kindness could not exist without hidden motive." He expected anger, outrage, perhaps tears. Yet Clara stood still for a long moment, her gaze steady, her lamp flickering shadows across the walls, and then she set the poker in the fire and answered with quiet strength. "I suspected as much." Stunned, Sam asked how she knew, and she smiled faintly, explaining that no one breathes quite so evenly by accident, that coins do not scatter without purpose. But instead of condemning him, she added, "I did not judge you for it, for I know what it is to be betrayed, and I know how fear makes prisoners of us all." Sam felt as though the ground had been pulled from beneath him, for not only had she seen through his deception, she had chosen to forgive it, and in that moment, the weight of years of bitterness broke, replaced by a longing so fierce he could hardly speak. Over the weeks that followed, their relationship shifted subtly. Sam no longer feigned sleep but sought conversation, asking about her late husband, about the dreams she once held of raising children on a farm of their own, and Clara listened in turn as Sam confessed the scars of betrayal and the loneliness wealth had never cured, and slowly, gently, the walls between them crumbled until what remained was not master and servant but two souls, wounded yet healing, finding solace in one another's presence. Yet the town, ever hungry for gossip, began to spin its tales with sharper tongues, whispering that the rich rancher had taken a poor widow under his roof for reasons less than honorable, and soon the whispers grew so loud that they reached Clara's ears, filling her with shame, for she feared she had become a burden to Sam's reputation. And one morning she approached him with trembling hands and announced her decision to leave, to find work elsewhere, to spare him the scandal of her presence. But Sam, stricken by the thought of losing her, rose from his chair and said with a firmness that left no doubt, "Let them talk, for I would rather have one day of truth with you than a lifetime of silence among liars." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes, for no one had ever defended her so fiercely, and in that instant she understood that Sam's heart had changed, not because of her service, but because of the love that had quietly taken root between them. The following Sunday, when the townsfolk gathered at the small white church, Sam stood before them all, his voice carrying over the pews, and declared his intention to marry Clara Moore, not as a rancher taking pity on a widow, but as a man, humbled by the strength of a woman who had taught him the meaning of trust. The crowd gasped, some in disbelief, some in envy, but none could deny the conviction in his voice or the tenderness in the way he looked at her. Their wedding was simple, held beneath the wide prairie sky, the air filled with the scent of wild flowers and the distant lowing of cattle, and though there were no chandeliers, no jeweled gowns, no parade of wealthy guests, the vows spoken with trembling sincerity, and the tears of two souls who had finally found a home in each other. In the years that followed, the Hargrave Ranch thrived not only with cattle but with joy, for Clara filled the house with warmth it had never known. opening its doors to the poor, feeding the hungry, and Sam, once hardened by suspicion, became known not only as the richest rancher, but as the kindest, his legacy transformed by the love of a woman who had passed every test, without ever knowing she was being tested. And so, dear listener, as this tale draws to its close, remember that trust, once broken, and that love often comes when we least expect it, carried in the quiet acts of care we take for granted. If this story has touched you, if you wish to hear more tales of the Wild West where love blooms against all odds, then do not forget to subscribe to the channel, for your support keeps these stories alive and ensures that many more journeys of the heart will reach you beneath the endless sky.